Well, these are issues that cause emotions, and sometimes emotions get in the way of good policies and good politics and good legislation. But you'd be very happy to hear that I have a video on this on my website, www.fireandfallbrother.ca. I really do, but I'm a parent of 2 school-age kids, and that's why I do have that video. It's something that's important to me. My kids are in public school in Calgary. But I want to tell you that as a parent of my children, I believe that I can be informed and should be informed about everything that my kids are going to be taught. I haven't pulled my kids out of anything ever, but I want to know that they're going to take it. I want to know if my teenage daughter is going to go through sex education, that I at least have a little bit of heads up that this is going to happen. And if I chose to pull my daughter out, which I've not done, but if I chose or wanted to for any belief ever, I should have the right to take my kid out of that. And I don't say that because I'm an extremist or anything. I just want to know that my daughter is going to come home and tell me she had sex ed. And I have a son, and that might even be worse. But I'm a guy, so I worry about the daughters. But I also believe in a parental right to choose where their children go to school and what's best for those children. And I'm not, I say this for, I'm not disagreeing with anybody. I don't think here on this stage, I think we all have very similar ideas. But it's not out of extremist, and in what I say, and in the policy of parental ability to take someone out or be informed of what's coming to school, there has to be exceptions. I'm a lawyer, I'm in court all the time talking about exceptions. There has to be exceptions, so if a child cannot be told, or the parents cannot be told that they're gay and the parent's going to abuse them and there's a fear of that, that's an exception. Otherwise, in almost every circumstance, parents have the right.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Just to be clear, Dr. Starkey will have his 90 seconds, Mr. Khan will have 45 seconds, and Mr. Kenny will be given his full 90 seconds after that. Dr. Starkey.
Okay, I want to be very clear, and I am clear and on the record, and I have spoken in the legislature several times defending parental choice and parental rights in terms of choices in education, and we've lived that, my friends. We homeschooled both of our sons. My wife took time away from her veterinary career in order to do that, and I think they've turned out okay. One's a political scientist, so we could argue that either way. But nonetheless, I have, and I am on the record as having argued on behalf of parental choice. I defended the choice of homeschooling repeatedly. When Brian Mason said the homeschools are a fringe group, I took him on that. When David Egan defunded the wisdom homeschooling, I was the first one to take him on that. And so, ladies and gentlemen, that indeed is action, not just words. Now, let's shift to GSAs and Bill 10. I voted for Bill 10. I also voted for Bill 7, which extended protection against discrimination against transgender Alberta. I am proud of that record. And ladies and gentlemen, it's absolutely true that parents ideally should be informed of every club that their child is involved in, unless it's a matter of life and death. And believe you me, sometimes it is. And in those circumstances, there must be exceptions. There must be the flexibility so that students are not put in a position whereby their lives could be jeopardized. Higher suicide rates, higher rates of homelessness amongst gay students. And that is a reality. That's not a concept, and that is something that Bill 10 and GSAs address.
Thank you, Dr. Starkey. Mr. Khan, 45 seconds, then Mr. Kenny, 90 seconds.
Well, thank you. And again, I want to be as clear as my friend Richard Starkey. I absolutely support parental choice in terms of knowing where your son or daughter is going to school and where they actually get their education, whether that be home, a charter school, or the public school system. But what this comes down to, again, is the safety of our children. And when I told my daughter what happened at the policy conference in Red Deer, she got emotional. She said, why would people want to move us backwards? And this comes down to forward-thinking values that all Albertans share. And as I travel the province and meet in the constituency associations, this topic comes up all the time. And like Richard, I'm very proud of my work to support Bill 10. But the question comes up about Mr. Kenny. And if he's in charge, will he repeal Bill 10? This is an important question.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. Thank you. Mr. Kenny, you get your full 90
seconds. Why he got that rebuttal, because he wasn't attacked, but in any event, listen, I believe one of the greatest achievements of the Progressive Conservative Party in the last 4 decades was our tradition of school choice, which gave us some of the best education outcomes, but also reflected a fundamental value inscribed in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the prior right of parents to direct the education of their children. And we know this socialist government intends to undo that. We know they expressed that in their attack on wisdom homeschooling. That was repudiated by a court of law. And so I think one of the things we must do as a party is continue to stand for that value, which involves respect for parental involvement in children's education. I agree completely with both Richard and Byron that in situations where there might be abusive parents or where teachers have evidence that children could face risk, parents should not be involved. There are already protocols and laws that deal with those situations. If there are abusive or dangerous parents, they should be turned over to social services. Or the other day in Hawkwood, a lady came up to me after a function. Daughter with autism had expressed doubt about her gender in school and was put in a route of counseling, was referred to as a boy, given a boy's name by the school without ever being informed for months. Now, I don't think that's appropriate. I think that mom, how can she be treating the child one way at home and a different way at school, creating even more confusion for that child? That's not compassionate. We need to trust Alberta parents. The vast majority of whom are good and loving, compassionate parents to be involved in raising their children.
Mr. Moderator, I asked Mr. Kenny a question, and I didn't.
Excuse me, Mr. Khan. We'll go in the order of the way. This will be open forum now. Dr. Starkey and Mr. Nelson, would you like 45 seconds, or Dr. Starkey would like 45 seconds?
Yes, thank you very much. You know, but the question remains, and it is a critical question, that while these mechanisms may well be in place, they are not sufficient in terms of giving comfort to LGBTQ kids across our province. And if you actually talk to and you actually listen to students who are in high school or less than 25 or 30, you know, quite frankly, they can't even understand what the issue is. Absolutely. They can't even understand why we're debating this. Because LGBTQ rights is something that is fundamental. It is in our Constitution. It is in our Bill of Rights. It has been protected for years. Now, it was removed when the immigration manual for new immigrants was revised by Mr. Kenny when he was immigration minister, but nonetheless, they are a reality. And Bill 10 is a reality, and we cannot be the party that says they're going to repeal Bill 10, full stop.
Thank you, Mr. Mr. Nelson, would you like 45 seconds?
Thank you. Richard and I better get in on this party here. It's said in court that bad facts make bad law. And so I think sometimes when we're dealing with such an emotionally heated issue as this, it's very easy to pick, and I use the word extreme just to mean the ends of the argument. We've heard some of the examples, and I think everybody on this stage has generally agreed to parental rights, and parental rights subject to some very limited exceptions. But I wanted to talk quickly, because I didn't talk in my main part, about Bill 10. And Bill 10 shouldn't even be an issue right now. It is an issue because as progressive conservatives, as a government, we handled it very badly. It was introduced poorly. It was a liberal motion that was put forward that we tried to usurp and had horrible law. But Bill 10, when it finally got fixed by Prentice in about March or April of 2015, was the right law.
Thank you.
Bill 10 needs to stay.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Mr. Khan, 45 seconds to you.
Well, thank you. And I think it's very clear and evident that I feel passionate about this issue and where I stand on this issue. And as Richard mentioned, where I was heartened was in Red Deer, where the young people from our PCYA showed up and spoke incredibly eloquently about why Bill 10 is so important and what it means to Albertans and is a reflection of Albertans as a modern society. So I have just one question, and it's directed to Mr. Kenny. Would you repeal Bill 10?
No.
Mr. Kenny, 45 seconds.
Chair, but could I get clarification on the rules?
Okay, so when
you get more interventions the more you attack people. Is that how it works?
You mentioned Mr. Khan. To be clear, Mr. Kenny, you mentioned Mr. Khan, Mr. Nelson, and Mr. Starkey were left. Dr. Starkey were left out of the debate.
Okay.
I allowed Dr. Starkey.
I thought the rebuttal was
to
to respond to an attack, not to level another.
I felt it was appropriate to get Dr. Starkey and Mr. Nelson in here, else they'd be left out of the debate. So I felt it was appropriate to go around that and come back to Mr. Khan. So, Mr. Kenny, you will end this question with your 45 seconds.
A couple of things. First of all, as I said, I agree with Richard and Byron that there are already protocols and laws in place to protect vulnerable children from bad situations and bad parents. But the vast majority of parents are good, compassionate parents who we should trust. And we should not have politicians dictating the resolution of extraordinarily complex and sensitive issues. I, for one, as a political leader, not prepared to tell that woman in Calgary, that mother, that she's not allowed to know what's going on in the mind of her 12-year-old autistic daughter. I don't think that's right for the daughter or the mother. And so we need some sensitivity and common sense and flexibility. Yes, of course, safety for children who might face dangerous situations, but not taking as a presumption that parents are all going to be bad parents for their children. That nothing could be further from the truth, and that mom deserves to be involved in raising her child.
Thank you. The next question has to do with a question that many members have asked the debate organizers to insert. Recently, a former MLA crossed the floor to the NDP amid allegations of harassment and bullying, and now is publicly saying the PC party is no place for women. The policy's convention investigation reported 4 additional incidents. As leader, what environment will you create within the PC party that will bring out the best in politics and create an environment that will attract the best and brightest into the party? We'll start with Mr. Nelson on this question.
Well, I heard a collective groan when you asked the question, so I don't know who exactly put this forward. I'm sorry that this happened. I'm sorry that this is something we're talking about, towards the end of January, middle January, I guess, of 2017, because to my knowledge, as a 25-year member, this awful situation has happened once, right? And I look at the campaigns of my friends, and I don't mean to plug my fellow colleagues, but they're full of women and men of the highest order. And this room is full of women and men of the highest order. And 5 generations of my family that have been in this party are, believe me, full of women and men of the highest order. So let's not sit here and hullabaloo over an awful incident, because awful incidents do happen. We appropriately responded to this as a party, and I commend Catherine O'Neill and her board for the way they dealt with an awful incident. We didn't know what to do with it. It was not tied, as far as I can tell, and I've read some reports, to any candidate. This was people in the party getting overly excited about something. Catherine and her team, I don't mean to exclude them, have brought forward a code of conduct that applies to all of us as members of this party and attendees of the political function, that if we can't behave, we got to get the heck out of that event. That's the way to do it. And to be a leader of this party is to go forward and recognize that this party, the historical party, included the famous 5, included the first female premier of Alberta, and has included some of the women that I look up to the most, including my mother, in this provincial history.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. And what type of leader you will be.
A good one.
The next is, thank you.
An equal one, an open one.
Mr. Kenny, 90 seconds to you.
So civility, I think, is important to everybody. We need to ensure that civility is respected by all political actors in our party. But let's face it, in a political party, from time to time, emotions are going to run high, and people are going to say unkind things about one another. When that happens, we need to recognize it, apologize, try to reconcile and move forward. I've been involved in different parties for a long time, and I don't recall incidents like the one that was described by this NDP MLA. So I think that we need to ensure that there is appropriate follow-up when such allegations are made, which was the case here. Lord knows I've received my share of nastiness directed at me throughout the course of this campaign. But you know what I do? I ignore it and I move on, because quite frankly, folks, you know something? People in this province are losing their homes, their businesses, their jobs, and their hope. We should be talking about them and not ourselves as a party.
Thank you. Dr. Starkey?
Well, thank you. Certainly this was an issue that was addressed as well at the Fort McMurray debate, and I want to be clear. Sandra Jansen, when she was part of our caucus, was a valued colleague. She spoke passionately on a number of issues, including persons with developmental disabilities. She was instrumental in getting rid of the CIS assessment by the current Social Services Minister, and I think we need to acknowledge and recognize the work that she did when she was member of our caucus. Moving forward, though, it is critical that our party be open and accepting and inclusive of all people, men, women, young, old, and regardless of your race, your gender, as it's been said before, where you pray, who you love, that doesn't matter. What matters is we are a conglomeration of people with ideas, and those ideas are the ones that will build good policy. That's what we are all about in this party, and we always have. And I reject the notion that there is no place for women in our party. Our president is a woman. Our youth president is a woman. Our past president, who many would say saved this party from oblivion after the election, was a woman, a very strong woman. And we've always had very strong women be part of our caucus and our cabinet. Helen Hunley, Connie Osterman, Shirley McClellan, Iris Evans, Heather Klimchuk, Diana McQueen. These were all outstanding Alberta women, and we will continue to attract outstanding Alberta men and women to form our next government.
Thank you. Mr. Khan.
Well, again, I want to stand up here and be absolutely clear with my colleagues that there is no place for bullying or arrogance or entitlement in the PC party in any way, shape, or form. If 2015 taught us anything, that has to be one of our lessons. And I'll tell you, as the son of an incredibly strong woman, I'm married to a remarkable and beautiful and incredibly strong woman, and we're raising a young daughter who is going to knock everybody's socks off. I tell you that we absolutely have to embrace all cultures, all genders, if we're going to be a successful party. And we have a rich history of doing so. And I have a pledge that I will stand up. Leadership is about standing up to bullying. Absolutely standing up to bullying. And we had an investigation, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't hostile and things happened. But I'll come back to our party being a party that's always supported women. So much so that we had 2 women who wanted to be leaders of this party. But in Red Deer that changed, and the events in Red Deer were horrid, and we need to stand up and be sincere about it. And I'll tell you, again, we didn't have those kind of events until those kind of incidents happening in our party until Red Deer, when we saw a certain angry, divisive element show up. And that can't be who we are as progressive conservatives, for if that is, it will tear us down. And leadership is standing up to the bullies all the time, not just standing by and watching while your campaign threatens PC leadership and say, go ahead, find me, because we've got lots of money. That's bullying. And not to stand up and address that issue,
thank you.
That's not leadership.
Thank you. Question, would anyone like 45 seconds? No? We'll move on to the next question. This one has to do with rebuilding the party, but specifically in Edmonton, the capital region. Historically, the PC party has found greater success outside of Edmonton than in it. Now there are no MLAs, PC MLAs in the capital region. The latest numbers from Stats Canada peg Edmonton as the 3rd fastest growing city in this country. Within the upcoming Boundary Commission review and Edmonton's outsized growth, the region is only getting more important. How are you going to rebuild the party in Edmonton? And the first, this question first goes to Mr. Kenny.
Well, first, the good news is that 5 months after that provincial election, when the PC party was unfortunately wiped out in the city, we elected 9 of 12 Conservative MPs in the constituencies around Metro Edmonton. And in fact, since the federal merger in 2003, a merger, by the way, which happened in 10 months, we managed to elect, in 3 of those 4 elections, all but 1 Conservatives. Edmonton is a blue city. The majority of Edmonton voters believe in free enterprise. They believe in rewarding success instead of punishing it. They believe in personal and fiscal responsibility, law and order, the importance of family. The majority of Edmontonians do, but they need to be united at the next election to ensure that we defeat the NDP at the polls. United, we are stronger. United we are stronger, and I just want to take that majority of Edmontonians who voted for the unhyphenated Conservative Party of Canada, electing 9 of 12 MPs in this city last October, and translate the same sensible, broad Conservative coalition to the provincial level at the next election.
Thank you. Dr. Starkey.
Well, the first thing I'm going to do is respond a little bit to what was just said by the previous candidate. There is a basic problem with taking federal politics and federal political voting patterns and trying to extrapolate them and turn them into provincial plans. That is a basic problem. It is a fallacy. And if you try to do that, look at our former colleague Matt Genereux. He was crushed in Edmonton Southwest. Sadly, I'm not sure if you're here, Matt, but you were, and that's just the way it is. But he then came back 5 months later and won easily. It had nothing to do with having a single party. And Mr. Kenny, if you look at the numbers, in virtually every single Edmonton seat, you could add up the PC and the Wild Rose vote in the last election, and you wouldn't even come close to the NDP total. So don't tell me that in Edmonton we just put the parties together and away we go and we win those seats. What Edmonton requires is sound policy. What Edmonton requires is centrist policy. And what Edmonton requires is a progressive vision, because Edmonton is a different city from Calgary. I was born and raised here. I know that. And while I've made Lloydminster my home for the last 30 years, I still am proud to come back to Edmonton and yes, cheer for the Oilers and the Eskimos. So that is Edmonton, and that is how we rebuild Edmonton. We rebuild Edmonton by regaining the trust of the Albertans in Edmonton, rebuilding the constituency associations, all of which takes time. And we won't have that time if we decide to blow up the Progressive Conservative Party and pursue some sort of weird merger option.
Thank you. Mr. Kenny? Mr. Kenny, would you like 45 seconds?
Sure. Richard, I'm very pleased to have Matt Genereux's endorsement for my leadership campaign. Because he understands that he couldn't have won that federal election without unity. If there was, he had Progressive Conservatives and Wild Rosers and fellow travelers all supporting him. I've received the endorsement of every federal Conservative MP because they see the benefit of working together. They understand that unity is stronger than division. They understand that we're all working together productively in the same federal party and winning elections in the unhyphenated Conservative Party of Canada. And, you know, it's true, many Edmonton ridings last time, the NDP won an absolute majority. It's also true that the federal Conservatives won a majority of the vote, because I would argue it is in touch with a lot of hardworking, blue-collar, even union dues-paying NDP members who want a government that's on their side, and that's what we should do in the next election.
Next on this question is Mr. Khan.
Well, people, you know, we know what the definition of insanity is, don't we? It's doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And didn't we try to unify these two parties in 2015? And didn't we see what the results were? Absolutely we did. And it didn't work then. And it was brought forth by the same type of federal ideology and the federal concept that Alberta votes federally Conservative, so we have to vote Conservative on a provincial level. And I'll tell you what, Albertans are sophisticated voters. Albertans and Edmontonians particularly understand that on the provincial level, the provincial government holds the purse strings for healthcare, education, and social services. These are fundamental services that Albertans cherish and don't want destroyed. They don't want these services jeopardized, and particularly in Edmonton, which, as Richard says, is an incredibly progressive, dynamic city. And I'll tell you right now, if Edmonton thinks for a moment that the Wild Rose element has somehow infiltrated and taking over the Progressive Conservative Party, or this Franken Party, Richard's stealing my line, so I'm stealing his now. If this Franken Party somehow takes over, I'll tell you, Edmonton will not support any party that they believe is intolerant or regressive in any way. And that's why this unity party will not have success in Edmonton.
Thank you. Mr. Nelson, you're last on this question, and we'll go to Dr. Starkey for 45 seconds. Mr. Nelson.
Yeah, well, I think the best thing we can do to excite Edmonton about what we're doing is to send the Flames up once in a while to lose in a shoot. It hurt. It hurt last night. It hurt. But well, you know, I would do it for this party in this province. Byron Nelson for Alberta. But I want us to remember that even though there's no on a serious note, there's no PCMLAs in Alberta, in Edmonton right now. There has been. There's been great PCMLAs in the past. There's been great MLAs in the whole history from the PC party and throughout the time from this region. So let's not forget that we elected no PCs and no Wild Rose members. Why is that? Because as a PC party, we lost the trust and faith of Edmontonians, just like we lost the trust and faith of Albertans across the province. And until we realize that we're broken, and by the way, that other party on the right didn't do so well, they're broken. We're doing our part to fix ourselves. I don't think they are. But simply duct taping two broken parties together isn't going to elect small C conservative MLAs in this city. And I want to make one fact clear, because it's something that I think is important to talk about, because I was involved as a volunteer federally, as I have been provincially for a lot of years. The Canadian Alliance was founded in 2000. Prior to that, there was a United Alternative created by Preston Manning. It took a heck of a lot of years before those two parties finally wrapped up. Not 10 months.
Thank you.
Years and years, and it was until 2006 we got it going.
Dr. Starkey, 45 seconds.
Well, I just want to address a couple of pieces of revisionist history. First of all, because of what happened in October of 2015, you cannot make conclusions because you already had the NDP victory in May of 2015 in your rearview mirror. You cannot pretend that the NDP victory did not have an influence on the October 2015 election. It absolutely did. And so to take these extrapolations and to, once again, morph federal ideology and federal party politics onto provincial and try to turn what we have here into a federal party that mirrors what we have in the federal party is plainly wrong. It will not work. And quite frankly, I am a member of both parties and I support both. But they are different. The responsibilities for the provinces, for provincial, for municipal are all different, as Stephen pointed out.
Thank you, Dr. Starkey. Would you like 45 seconds?
Yes, please.
Well, let's go in the order of the question. Mr. Kenny would get the first 45 seconds.
So, it's not an aberration, the result of the federal election in Edmonton last October 2015. In fact, since the federal merger in 2003, the federal Conservative Party has won, on average, 58% of the popular vote in Edmonton, and in most of those elections, all but one of the seats in the metropolitan area. And I don't know what you mean by a federal ideology. A party is made up of its people. And 95% or more of the active people in the Conservative Party of Canada in this city are active in either the PC or Wild Rose parties. And if they can work together, focusing on what unites them rather than what divides them to win elections, to advance our broad free enterprise values, why wouldn't they? We decided to bury the hatchet. And unfortunately, I think some of the people on this stage probably would have been opposed to the federal merger back in 2003. History proved those naysayers wrong.
Thank you. Mr. Khan, 45 seconds.
Well, after a lot of soul searching, I think we all agreed that one of the primary reasons we lost in 2015, as resolutely as we did, was because we lost the trust of Albertans. And we've talked about also this trust deficit that exists between our strongest asset, which is our constituency associations, and the party and the elected officials candidates. And that's what we have to absolutely focus on, not just in Edmonton, but all around the province, is a real legitimate engagement of our constituency associations and a two-way dialogue where they can provide input. Now, if we went to our constituency associations in 2015 and said, we're thinking of calling an early election, what do you think they would have said to us? That's the level of engagement we need to get Edmonton back. That's how we'll get the rest of the province back.
Thank you. And our final question for the lightning round. Millwoods is a very diverse, ethically diverse community. We are in Millwoods right now. In the context of world events and a perceived rise of intolerance and a coarsening political atmosphere, there have been incidents at mosques, synagogues, Sikh temples, gurdwaras. that have been targeted of racist graffiti, etc., and people feeling less safe. The PC party wants to be a party, be a big tent party. And some are perceiving that we may be going too far right in overreaching in responding to the NDP. How would you combat rising intolerance, and how will you ensure that the PC party as a big tent party is a party that is very inclusive? And I'll start this question off to Mr. Khan.
Well, I'll start by acknowledging the fact that my grandfather moved to Alberta from Pakistan in 1956. And I'm incredibly proud of my heritage, and I see that heritage reflected in this room today and this vibrant community. And as we've talked about, Edmonton is one of the youngest, most multicultural communities in all of Canada, and we need to be incredibly proud of that. And as a party, we absolutely have to embrace those values. If those are the moderate progressive values whereby generally make us Albertan. And again, I'll say it again, it doesn't matter what you look like or where you're from or who you love or where you pray. If you work hard here, you are Albertan and you have an incredible opportunity to have success. And that's what makes us resolute as Albertans. And I'll tell you, Albertans want people to stand up for those rights. Albertans demand that you stand up for those rights. And I've talked about the myth of the Alberta redneck. That just doesn't exist. Albertans want to embrace the character of a person and judge you on who those are. And it will stand up, and if we stand up and fight for those values, we will have success as a progressive conservative party. But again, you talk about going too far to the right. And we see in these delegate selection meetings, folks who are from that right element coming in and taking over. Folks, this is a hostile takeover of our progressive conservative party.
Thank you.
Well, you know, leaders got to lead. And by leading by example, we show what this province should be. Leaders have to be inclusive. It's a similar issue we talked about with the unfortunate Sandra Jansen incident. When something bad happens, you have to take decisive, swift response through good leadership. But I want to say there are a lot of differences, not just in Millwoods, but across this province. Stephen has mentioned that a lot. These are differences we can celebrate. I think one of the positive things about ever being on a political campaign is how much you get to celebrate these differences and go to different places. And I'll use an example. I have lots of Sikh friends back home, and I live in the west side of Calgary, where there's a beautiful Sikh temple, and they have helped me realize about something as interesting and something I wouldn't know about as the helmet law for both ATVs, which has recently been passed, and the motorbike law. And the young guys want to see an amendment to that law to allow them to travel without helmets on ATVs and on motorbikes. And I'm supportive of that because of how they've explained to me that it would otherwise interfere with their with their religion. That's how we proceed, by celebrating our differences and not using a cookie cutter, one-size-fits-all response to everything.
Thank you. Mr. Kenny?
Well, I've devoted much of my life to this question. As a 10-year federal minister for multiculturalism, having attended over 6,000 events in ethnic and cultural communities, as part of a project to reach out on behalf of the federal party and rebut pre-existing stereotypes about conservatives, and working on incredibly important issues like the federal apology for the Chinese head tax and the redress on the Komagata Maru or the Ukrainian First War Internment, dozens of similar issues, getting into the guts of complex issues in our cultural communities, and creating the security infrastructure project that helped mosques and synagogues and other vulnerable institutions improve their security through all of that work, and communicating a message of conservative values openly to the new Canadians, the overwhelming majority of whom are natural, intuitive conservatives. We managed to double the support for the Conservative Party of Canada amongst new Canadians between 2004 and 2011. I am immensely proud of that, having recruited an incredibly diverse, helped to elect the most diverse government caucus in Parliament's history up to that point. I was in this room with 1,000 friends from the Filipino community last night. I was around the corner at both Hindu Mandirs celebrating Diwali a few weeks ago. You will, I'll tell you something, if I become leader of this party, I will not relent. We will reach reach out to every cultural community, every new Canadian, and encourage them to vote their values, people who believe in economic freedom, private enterprise, the importance of family and respect for traditions. Those are our people, our natural constituents.
Thank you. Dr. Starkey.
Well, I want to tell a little story about my own background. My parents came to Alberta in the early 50s. It was less than a decade since my father actually had been conscripted as a child soldier to fight for Germany against the Russian Red Army. They faced prejudice and they faced discrimination. So this is not something that is new. This has been present. It was present before my parents came, and sadly it continues, because it is one of the sad parts of human nature is that we are suspicious of newcomers. And that's too bad. We shouldn't be that way, but that is part of it. But you know, we can overcome that suspicion. We can overcome it by making clear that it's not acceptable in Canadian society. My parents became progressive conservatives because of one man, the Right Honourable John George Diefenbaker, because he told them, even though they weren't even Canadian citizens yet, they were welcome in this country because they could contribute. And some 30 years later, my mother won the Canadian Volunteer Award for contributions to her community. That's what being Canadian is about. And that's why it's critical that we make sure that everyone in our society is welcome and included, and that we speak out against discrimination. As an example, when there were those hateful posters put up around the University of Alberta and the Turban A event was organized, I was there. I looked pretty good in a turban. Slimming, and it's warm as well. So there's a lot of things that we can do to stand shoulder to shoulder in solidarity with those groups that are discriminated against, that feel prejudice, and tell them that that's not Canadian and it's certainly not Albertan.
Thank you very much. That would wrap up the questions that the moderator will ask, but we thought we would end before the closing statements with something. Do we have 45 seconds on that? Mr. Khan, it's already 4 o'clock. We're gonna have to move on. We'll do a short and lightning round as well before we do closing statements. But these are questions that give a little personality and a little bit of a serious question. Then we'll get to the lighter fare. This is a yes or no. We'll start with Mr. Nelson, Mr. Kenny, Dr. Starkey, and then Mr. Khan. Mr. Nelson, you first. Regardless of the outcome of this race, will you remain in the party going into the next election and support the eventual leader?
100%. Yes, I've been a member of this party for 25 years. The members of this party make a mistake and select someone else. That person will have my support.
Thank you. Just a reminder, it's already 4 o'clock, so if we could keep them brief. This is a lightning round, of course.
Was it yes or no? I guess.
Yes. Mr. Kenny.
Yes.
Dr. Starkey.
As a current sitting member of our party, I'm proud to be so. Yes, absolutely.
Mr. Khan.
In the one answer spirit of my colleagues here, if that leader possesses the values of the Progressive Conservative Party and Peter Lougheed, absolutely yes.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. Some lighter fare. First on this will be Mr. Kenny, then Dr. Starkey, Mr. Khan, then Mr. Nelson. Mr. Kenny, who is the most important, significant person you have ever met?
Well, apart from my mom and dad, my mind goes to Mother Teresa. I met in college, and I was working at her sister's AIDS hospice in San Francisco. I went to university.
Thank you.
That would be the person that comes to mind.
Dr. Starkey.
Well, that's easy, but it's not one person, it's two. It's my mom and my dad. Everything I am, I owe to them.
Mr. Khan.
My wife.
Mr. Nelson.
My kids, Peter Lougheed and Ralph Klein.
Next,
sorry, the question's over.
Next, Dr. Starkey, Mr. Khan, Mr. Nelson, and Mr. Kenny. What was the last concert you went to? Dr. Starkey.
The opera, wasn't it, Richard?
Well, I'm a season ticket holder at Edmonton Opera, so let's call it that. I have been for 20 years. Love opera, but I won't sing.
Mr. Khan.
I think it was the Arkells.
Okay. Mr. Khan. Mr. Nelson.
I'm so embarrassed. Nicki Minaj, but it was at a pre-Super Bowl party. It was at Super Bowl.
Mr. Kenny.
I'm not hip though, I really am.
Would have been a Filipino choir performing here in Edmonton.
Cool. This question will be Mr. Khan, Mr. Nelson, Mr. Kenny, and Dr. Starkey. Where do you buy groceries, and do you make a list or not? And Mr. Khan.
I buy groceries at Safeway, and I follow my wife's list diligently.
Mr. Nelson.
I buy it. There's a Sobeys near my house. I buy there, and half the time I would use a list when I'm actually making something more significant than my usual fare.
Okay.
Mr. Kenny.
Whatever's open very late, because I'm usually getting home when most of those places are closed.
Dr. Starkey.
Safeway and never.
This question will be, This question will be Mr. Nelson, Mr. Kenny, Dr. Starkey, Mr. Khan. What is the last book you read, and why did you like it so much, Mr. Nelson?
Someone gave me Notley Nation for Christmas, but I haven't finished it, so that wouldn't... other than that, I'm very much a fan of historical fiction, and I really enjoy that genre.
Mr. Kenny.
Conservatism of the Heart by David Brooks.
Dr. Starkey.
Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek.
Mr. Khan.
And I'm sorry to say it was Notley Nation. It was given to me by my sister, and I did not enjoy it at all.
I'm going to ask this question. NHL, CFL, or Blue Jays? Which do you watch most, and which sport have you played the most? Mr. Kenny.
CFL and rugby.
Dr. Starkey.
NHL and soccer, or what they call football over in Europe.
Mr. Khan.
Oilers and all of the above. Pretty much every sport.
Mr. Nelson.
Both CFL and NHL and rugby, and Jason and I were talking about maybe having a match upstairs before this.
Not a good idea. I surrender already.
The final question for the lightning round. This will go to Mr. Khan. First, which charity holds a special place in your heart?
The St. Albert Food Bank. It does remarkable work for our community, and I'm proud to be a supporter.
Thank you. Mr. Nelson.
Well, I'm the head of the Shriners Hospitals for Children in Southern Alberta for another week, so I better say that to whichever camera is. Get your donations in.
Mr. Kenny.
L'Arche, which is a global network of homes for intellectually challenged people, and we have them in Alberta as well.
Thank you. And finally, Dr. Starkey.
Well, I'm a longtime contributor to the Rotary Foundation, but the Lloydminster Region Health Foundation that I chaired for several years.
Thank you. And to conclude, we will conclude with the closing statements, which is designed to be sort of like an elevator pitch, a 1-minute statement from each of you. And we'll start with Dr. Starkey.
Well, thank you. I thank everyone for being here today. I think it's important that we have this dialogue, but I want to make it very clear. I am as interested in defeating the NDP as anybody else in this room. I am in the legislature and I see them in action every day, and trust me, I don't want them to be there after 2019. And that's something that people should never suggest, that because I do not favor a hastily put together option that isn't even allowed under Alberta law to merge the two parties. It would require too much time and is too complex, and frankly, folks, is too high risk. My path is to rededicate ourselves to our progressive conservative principles, to refocus our policies to be reflective of Alberta in the 21st century, and finally, to reinvigorate our party to attract new and existing members to once again be the force that we once were and win the 2019 election.
Thank you. Mr. Nelson.
Well, we're certainly, as I think we've all talked about today, we're at a very important time in the history of our province, one of the most important times. I'm worried about my kids, and my kids, whether they can actually stay here and pursue their dreams or have to go elsewhere, like so many other Canadians have to do. But policies are theoretical, because if we're not really careful how we run this party, we could be the 4 greatest people never to serve in government and to serve all of you in government. So we have to go forward. You can see some of this on my website at byronforalberta.ca. But I'm all for Conservatives working together. I did vote for the merger, eventually, federally. But we have to understand that we do only have 2 years. Look at my website, because there is no way to get one Conservative party in 2 years. I know we'd love it. There's not. So let's rebuild this party. Let's do it for ourselves, for each other, for the future, for Alberta.
Thank you. Mr. Khan.
Folks, we have a choice to make, and it's a crucial choice for our province and our party. We can choose an intolerant brand of leadership in politics that will take us backwards in time. An out-of-touch brand of politics that was first rejected by Alberta in 1971. It was rejected again in 2012. It was rejected in 2015. And that brand of politics will be rejected in 2019 again. Listen, Alberta is the youngest province in Confederation. And Alberta voters want principled, aspirational, hopeful leadership. Albertans want a conservative government that understands the business of being the economic engine of Canada, and they want modern, progressive social ideals that supports inclusivity across this province. In 2019, Albertans will vote for a party that best reflects those values. That, my friends, is the definition of a modern conservative movement. Please join me in my modern conservative movement as we renew this party, rebuild this province, and lead the province to victory in 2019. Thank you.
Mr. Kenny?
Albertans want their province back. They want a government as good as them. They don't want to take a risk on a second destructive term of this NDP government. They don't want us to sleepwalk into it because of vote splitting between two parties that are voting together in the legislature 90% of the time and who do not disagree on a single major issue in our politics today. And so I am proposing a big, broad, tolerant, diverse, sensible free enterprise coalition, a contemporary version of the Lougheed-Klein coalitions, a provincial version of the Conservative Party of Canada, an Alberta version of the Saskatchewan Party. And I am proposing not to impose this, but to let you, the members, decide. And that's the fundamental difference on this stage. I don't believe any of us should make this decision. It is too important. We must invest this decision in the grassroots members through a democratic referendum. We must park the egos, the brands, the labels, and the resentments, because we are stronger united than we are divided, and Albertans are counting on us to get this right.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to thank all the candidates for coming today. Just a reminder, there are food and refreshments at the back. You can meet and greet the candidates for the following hour after the debate, and there's also a cash bar. Thank you to all the candidates. Thank you for coming, and thank you, and let's win in 2019.
We've actually had debates in Red Deer, we've debated in Fort McMurray. No.
So going forward now from here, I mean, how do you change the strategy?
No, not at all, because the strategy reflects the will of progressive conservative members. The referendum that Mr. Kenny talks about having has happened. It happened in the course of hundreds and thousands of progressive conservative members coming to to constituency engagement sessions between May of 2015 and May of 2016, and overwhelmingly, and that was affirmed in May of 2016 in Red Deer, progressive conservative members want to rebuild and reinvigorate our party. That is the message. And that's why Stephen and Byron and I are all sort of saying that same message. Mr. Kenny has come to the party late. He thinks that that decision still has to be made. The decision has been made by members of the party. Now, having made that decision, we choose our leader and move forward. And the problem with Mr. Kenny's plan is it throws us into 2 more years of uncertainty. And if we worry that uncertainty hurts investment, I'll tell you, uncertainty really hurts politics. It hurts political support.
Well, I have to wonder. I mean, the reaction in this room when he was talking seemed to be pretty loud. You have a lot of people who are very supportive. Perhaps a good idea as well. Do you feel like the appetite is perhaps growing for that united right now?
Well, I think there is an appetite for defeating the current government. That is good. And as long as we can demonstrate to people very clearly that Mr. Kenny's plan is high risk and has a very limited amount of time, and any other place where it's been tried, it has failed. It's failed in the next election. In every other situation, the party in power stayed in power. And therefore, in the finite length of time we have available to us, our better course of action is to rebuild our party, let Wild Rose do what Wild Rose is going to do, and then come 2019, present those alternatives clearly to the Alberta electorate. And I'm confident that Albertans who have tired with this current NDP government will choose a moderate, centrist, competent option, and that's the Progressive Conservative Party.
All right.
Great.
We're all good to go.
The big economic issue is not partisan Twitter wars. I think, if everybody who said something nasty about me on Twitter was to have their party membership removed, that would be quite a number of people. So I think we should focus on the big issues that matter to all of us.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. I appreciate that.